Go ahead. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So, hi, Dr. Nourani. Thank you so much for joining us
Hi.
today. My name is Ava, and I'm the event coordinator here at Generation Science. And today I'm thrilled to be here with Dr. Nourani, who is a biology instructor at San Diego City College and Palomar College. She's also a science communication and social media consultant and serves as an instructor of marketing via social media at the University of California, San Diego Extension. She's also the founder and director of the Science Com Journal Club. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Nourani. So you can start whenever you like.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen for a slide presentation. I was asked to talk about vaccines and how do you communicate about them. So I'm going to. So I'm hoping you can see that. Let me go to the presentation mode. Okay. All right. You guys see this controls?
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay, I just wanted to get rid of these bars, but that's okay. For the Zoom bars. Okay. All right. So making sense of the vaccine debate. I am Sherry Nouranini, and as mentioned by Ava, um, I'm founder and executive director of Science Communication Journal Club. Sorry. So who are we? This is all the wonderful women that I work with. We are a team. And basically at Science Communication Journal Club, this is our mission statement. Our efforts is centered around giving scientists a place where they can find updates, the most recent updates about proper science communication. So just like the name implies, Journal Club, we find groundbreaking papers and we review them via Twitter chats, and we also have a podcast. A little bit more about me. You already heard something about me, but I'm a biology professor and I teach marketing by social media UCSD extension. I'm also an author. I wrote a book on, the name of the book is Social Solutions for Climate Change. It basically talks about strategies for communicating climate change and other types of science. And I'm happy to say that it has won a number of awards. And I'm also founder and executive director of SciComm Journal Club. So now we're going to go into the topic. So first, this is the agenda for today. Recent trends. I'm going to talk about recent trends in conversations about vaccines. How are people talking about vaccines, mainly online, and also what is the current way that people think about vaccines. And based on these results, we're going to debunk some common myths about attitudes towards vaccination, and then a little bit about what drives us human beings to take sides on issues. And I'm also going to give some do and don'ts of communicating about vaccines. So as I mentioned, we are a journal club and we like to learn what we can about groundbreaking work. And at the beginning of this talk, I'm going to talk about what we learned from the paper by Johnson et al. That was published in 2020. They conducted an analysis of conversations about vaccines on Facebook. And this conversation was taking place among nearly 100 million individuals. And these individuals basically were classified into three different groups: pro-vaccination, anti-vaccination, and those who are undecided, those who still have questions. And these are categorized based on what type of pages they followed. And this data was collected during the measles outbreak in 2019, it was a time when the conversation about vaccines was quite on top of everybody's mind. So what are the things, some of the important things they learned? Well, they looked at, as part of their work, they looked at two different things. One is total number of anti-vaccination, pro-vaccination, or undecided pages, and also the number of followers of these pages. So the top is a graph, is a pie chart, which follows the number of followers of each page type. So the red shows the anti-vaccination pages, blue pro-vaccination pages, and the green are undecided. And as this graph shows, anti-vaccination pages have the least number of followers in general. Then comes the pro-vaccination pages, and pages that are undecided with respect to the vaccine debate. These are, let's say, parenting pages, association pages. They have the largest number of followers. Now, when they looked at the number of different types of pages, they found out that actually pro-vaccination pages had the least number of follower. Sorry, these distract me when people want to get admitted. The pro-vaccination pages, there were the least number of them. So there were fewer pro-vaccination Facebook pages than anti-vaccination pages, but still pages that had an undecided viewpoint about vaccines, they had the largest number. So there are a number of important things in here to learn. First of all, it's always, it's a common misconception that people have two isolated and ideas about vaccination. It's the common myth is that people are polarized. You're either anti-vaccine or pro-vaccine. And this clearly shows that actually most people, at least in this population, 100 million people that they checked, most of them are undecided. Most of them have questions. And also, another important thing that the author noticed was that even though anti-vaccination pages had the lowest number of followers, they were more numerous. So there were more anti-vaccination pages around that undertook outreach activities. And this was interpreted by authors to say, well, it's true that these anti-vaccination pages have lower followers. There's more of them, and they can kind of go under the radar and do their work. And there's an important lesson in here in that, as you will see later, these anti-vaccination pages are very effective. And the important lesson is that you really don't have to have a large following per page in order to be effective. You just have to get out there and interact with people. And as I mentioned, there are lots of people that are undecided who are asking, they are out there and they're actively reaching out for answers to their questions. So they're not actually sitting there and waiting to be found by us. They're already looking for people to answer their questions. So some of the other important takeaways from this work was on the three aspects of these interactions. In terms of engagement, anti-vaccination pages were more engaged with the undecided pages. They actually actively reached out to the undecided pages. And this was not like the pro-vaccination pages. Pro-vaccination pages, actually, they were more occupied by larger pages. So they kind of, they were kept, if you like, distracted by the large pages rather than going out and reaching out to the undecided. The type of content that anti-vaccination pages posted was very diverse and covered the wide range of different types of topics. And this is very important because it shows the people who are in the anti-vaccination movement recognize that different people are interested in different things, and they come at their views about vaccinations from different angles. So it's important that your message is not monolithic. And now we get to the success that I mentioned. During this time that the study was done, the anti-vaccination pages showed the highest growth in numbers, and most of these growth was from pages that didn't have a lot of followers. They were kind of medium sized. And the large size anti-vaccination pages took up the attention of pro-vaccination pages. Now, all of this data allowed these scientists to run a simulation, to develop a model, to predict if things keep working the same way, what is going to happen in 10 years. And the prediction was that the simulation showed if we continue this way in 10 years, anti-vaccination pages will dominate the Facebook landscape, which is not good. It's not a good outcome. Now, the next paper that I'm going to summarize was done by anthropologists, and they performed a meta-analysis of research that was done into vaccine views of parents. And if you're not sure what a meta-analysis is, meta-analysis is looking at different publications, a large number of different publications that have already been published, the work that has already been done. And those who do the meta-analysis, they're trying to learn from these work and come up with some general themes that come out of different research that different people have already conducted. So these scientists, anthropologists look at a number of studies. Some of these are shown here. One group was a community in King County, Washington, and the study was about interviews inquiring about how parents made their vaccination decisions and the factors that influence these decisions. Another group was a parent-focused group in San Diego, and parents were asked about general questions about general health issues, nutrition, and so on. And a separate group of parents in San Diego, and they were interviewed about their vaccine decision-making process. And this meta-analysis showed that there is a range of different approaches to vaccination. And I've tried to show them in this image. So if this shows, let's say, the different vaccinations that children need to take, some parents that were interviewed, they would take all the vaccine for their kids and they wouldn't question the medical community. Some would get some vaccines but would refuse other vaccines. Some parents would take all the vaccines, but they would spread them out throughout time instead of getting all the, let's say, all 4 or 5 of them in one shot, because they thought that this would be safer. And on the other hand, there were some parents that just didn't want any vaccines at all. So this shows that, again, that this shows again that approaches of parents to vaccination is not just anti-vaccine. There's a whole range of different angles at which people come at this topic. Now, I've tried to show you here different types of groups of parents and the reasons that they gave for their decisions. Those who fully vaccinated their kids at the time that the doctor suggested, their idea was that their doctors know best. Some people are very risk averse, and no matter what you tell them, they still are worried about what if something happens to my child. Other people refuse vaccines because they just don't like the idea of somebody else telling them how they should make decisions for their child. And other people were worried about the vaccine ingredients. But what was common about all of them was that all of them were making these decisions because they thought they were doing something that is best for their child. So that was the common theme. So you can see the range of different views and the range of different approaches people take to vaccines. So we need to move away from this pro-vaccine, anti-vaccine point of view. This is not a realistic view of how parents in general look at vaccinations. And if we keep continuing with this line of thinking, we're going to alienate more and more parents who are undecided and they have legitimate concerns and questions. So how can we communicate better with the vaccine hesitant parents? So these are some of the things that I'm going to suggest based on what we've just discussed. We need to gain a more accurate picture of the reasons behind vaccination decisions. If we don't understand why people take a particular approach to something, we really can't approach them properly. We need to understand the concerns of each and every individual parent, because as you saw, the different reasons for not vaccinating is not the same. And we also have to distinguish between those who have really skepticism about vaccines and those that who are just outright rejected and they're deniers. And we need to do a better job of proactively reaching out to the undecided. And we have to avoid a monolithic message, because one size fits all does not work for communicating about vaccines. And we also have to connect our messaging with our audience's values, which ultimately drives their decision making. So the question is, okay, what shapes our decision making? What is it that drives our decisions? Well, there are a number of different things, but three of the most really important ones are here. One of them is life experiences. And one thing that really shapes us in life is what have we been exposed to. And parents who are really worried about vaccines hurting their children have had personal experience of someone whose child has shown an allergic reaction to the vaccine. And this is, really can't deny this. So we can still say that vaccines generally are safe, but we need to acknowledge the fact that some people are just allergic to vaccines, just like we can acknowledge the fact that peanuts are safe in general, but some kids are allergic to it to the point that you can't even have a peanut in the room at all. Or antibiotics are life-saving in general. We can agree that they are safe, but there are people who are allergic to it. So I think it's really important for us to acknowledge that yes, there are people who are allergic to vaccines. So if someone comes, if someone is worried based on their life experience of knowing someone who was close to them that showed allergic reaction, we really shouldn't immediately label them as an anti-vaccine. We should listen to what their concerns are. Second, our group affiliations really affect the way we think about things. So in order to really understand where a parent or someone who's hesitant with vaccine comes from, we really need to have a good understanding of who are their groups, who are they listening to, what groups do they belong. And also, ultimately, parents want to preserve the health of their kids and those who care about. So self-preservation and keeping their children healthy is the ultimate motivation for making a decision. So when we decide how to communicate with an audience, we need to take these things into account. So we need to understand our audience. So what are some of the questions we can ask? Who is this target audience? Who is this vaccine hesitant person? What are the things they care about? What motivates them? What underlying values is important to them? Because those are important, because those shape their decisions. So ultimately, you got to match your message with your audience's value. So the information that you provide um, needs to overlap. So you provide information, and here's your audience's values, but your information needs to take into account your audience's values. So it has to be a match between your audience's values and the message. So let's take a look at some examples. So, for example, let's say a mother is hesitant to vaccinate her child because of possible life-threatening allergic reactions. And the value that they have, they want to protect their child. So you need to take that into account. Now, here's some wrong ways you can approach it and maybe a way that would work better. One of the things that I've seen people do a lot is when someone presents the argument of the possibility of a child getting vaccine adverse events, people say, well, that's a very low statistic. Statistically, that's very low. But for a parent who want to protect their child, statistics don't mean anything. Even if the possibility is 1/1,000,000, if that one child who is allergic is one of that 1,000,000, they still care. They don't want that to happen to their child. So don't reduce people's children into statistics. Another thing that I've seen is, okay, do it for other kids because other kids can't get vaccinated because of underlying conditions they have. So you should vaccinate your kids so others can't. And again, this disregards the fact that this parent is only concerned about protecting their own child. They don't care about anybody else's child. So these won't work. So another one way that you can frame your message is comparing the side effects of vaccine preventable diseases with the possible side effects of a vaccine. So you can talk about the fact that mumps can cause deafness or death, measles can cause brain damage or death, rubella can give you arthritis in old age, miscarriage, or a birth defect. So then once you present these ideas, then the parents can decide the way they can weigh the relative probabilities of a vaccine, side effects from a vaccine preventable disease, or side effects from the vaccine itself, and make a decision, make an informed decision. Another example is someone who refuses to vaccinate their kids because they say, well, you should do what is good for your family. I'll do what I think is best for mine. So this comes from a place of really valuing freedom of choice. So again, there are two different ways you can approach this. You can say, well, you should vaccinate for the good of the community. But again, that goes against their desire to have a freedom of choice, to do whatever they want for themselves and their family. They don't care what the community wants. They value individual decision making, individual freedom. Another thing that I've seen people say is, well, CDC recommends vaccination because data showed it creates herd immunity. And usually people who want to have freedom of choice, they don't appreciate a government organization or a government or a health practitioner to tell them how to decide with respect to vaccination. So this argument is going to be rejected because it's coming from a position of authority who wants to force them to do something. So what can you do? Well, you can take their own logic and give them a scenario using their own logic in which they probably won't find it acceptable. So you could say, well, maybe a scenario of behavior, like you could say, well, our family likes to play a really loud electric guitar, and we feel that it's our best for our family to practice late in the night. Would you find that acceptable? Because we want to have freedom of choice, and we don't really care if it affects anybody else. So those are some examples, and let's look at, in general, the approaches you can take. First of all, the most important thing that you can do is to listen and ask questions before making any judgments. And it's really important to have empathy for people's feeling of uncertainty. So listen and ask questions to really understand their point of view, their worries, and the basis of their decisions. Next, frame the issue in a way that matches the important values that they may guide their decision making. So we had an example of a vaccine hesitant mother. And then you use their own value judgments and force them to see inconsistency between their values and attitudes or behavior. So this applies to that freedom of choice argument. And finally, sometimes people just don't know. Sometimes people just lack enough information to be able to make a decision, and they're making a decision based on a lack of knowledge. Or, as we saw in the first paper that I showed, there's a lot of people that just have questions. They don't know. So take the time, listen to what people say, what their questions are, and try to answer them the best that you can. It's also important that you arm yourself with the knowledge if you are going to enter into a situation where we're going to confront people about their vaccine views or any topic about science. And right now, particularly in this pandemic, one thing that is top of mind with everybody is whether or not they wear a mask, or whether or not they take a vaccine, whether or not it's safe. So it's important that we all find places where we can learn the latest information from experts who really know what they're talking about. And personally, I follow these 3 pages on Facebook. These ladies, they're all epidemiologists, and they're scientists, vaccination, infectious diseases. It's their bread and butter. This is what they've trained for, and they really give their time every day to give updates about vaccinations that are going on, updates about COVID. So I really encourage you to follow pages like this and arm yourself with the proper knowledge before really getting into a conversation with anyone who has concerns. So I'm pretty much done here. Just wanted to encourage you to follow us on social media. This is our information, and keep the conversation going. Use our hashtag SciCommJC, and come to Twitter or Instagram or Facebook or LinkedIn and come tell us if you have any questions, or we'd be happy to learn how you use the information that you learned. So that's it for me.
Thank you so much for that wonderful presentation. It was really interesting and I learned a lot, and I'm sure everyone else will really enjoy it. So I have some questions. Could I ask you?
Sure.
So how has the pandemic impacted communication in science, or your journal club specifically?
Our journal club, I think that in general, the pandemic has increased people's awareness about science. I think the latest surveys that have come up, it has shows that people actually are developing a more positive attitude toward science. And just because this issue is so important, many people who with expertise, just like the 3 pages that I showed you, they are stepping up and they are reaching out to people to answer their questions, which is a very, very positive outcome. Of course, there are people who are, let's say, QAnon and other people who are traditionally, they are anti-vax. They are doing whatever they can to discourage people from getting the vaccine. But luckily, this pandemic, unfortunately, has cost a lot of lives, but it also was a big wake-up call for people. And I think people sat up and paid attention. RNA has become, I mean, DNA was part of our normal life, but I think if RNA has become part of our normal language, and pretty much a lot of people now know what RNA is, which is fantastic.
Yes. So how would you approach a friend or a close family member when they are sharing misinformation?
I would listen to what they're saying and I would ask questions. Always start your conversations with questions, because then you can learn where it's coming from, and sometimes you can catch them being inconsistent. And then when you listen to what they're saying, be patient. You can go back. Sometimes when they share misinformation, you can go and research that in misinformation yourself and then go back to them and talk to them again. It takes a lot of patience, but if you're respectful, if you're patient, if you approach them without suggesting that they don't understand something, you don't get it, this is science or whatever, and respect their point of view, and get into a conversation and ask questions and try to sometimes get them to really understand what is wrong with their thinking. It takes time, it takes patience. You won't be able to change people's mind in one shot, but I can tell you that it works if you're patient. And also, you don't have to win all the battles. So you could have friend or family who have a variety of different points of view and wrong assumptions about certain things, but you don't have to fight all of them. Just fight and try to address the important ones, the ones that
Yeah.
are more um, consequential. So for example, if you have a family whose family member or friend who thinks they should waste their money on some supplement, who you know is basically a placebo effect, if it's really important for them, you don't have to fight them over it, right?
Yeah.
But if it's something that it's a topic that is very consequential, then so it's just the old saying, pick your battles.
Mhm. Thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome.
So what are some different careers in science communication?
Science journalism, there are people in science policy, and scientific institutions are beginning to realize the importance of having outreach. So there is this science information officer, that's a job title. So more and more scientific institutions are learning the importance of science communication. So yeah, these are some.
Nice. So how does social media affect science communication? And do you think like social media has increased um like myths in science?
Myths.
Like scientific myths.
Yeah, social media has good things and bad things.
Mm.
First of all, social media itself is a tool. So if we're saying that before social media, TV stations had, or there were newspapers that would publish wrong information or misinformation, we could like blame the tool, but it's actually the people behind the tool. So social media can be a tool that could be used for misinformation, which that, as you saw in the first paper that I summarized, plays a very important role for spreading misinformation, but it could also be a powerful tool for debunking it. So it all depends how to use it. And I encourage anybody who's interested in helping science advance and debunking disinformation to really start using social media and approaching people. Um, and the more people engage in science communication, the more is better. We cannot have enough.
Yeah. So what influenced you into founding the Science Communication Journal Club?
What influenced me? I saw what's going on social media. First of all, the one thing that influenced me was that I saw a lot of scientists joining social media, and they were not doing it properly in terms of their messaging, because one of the things that I do is I teach marketing by social media. I use CSD extension, and I've also written a book about communication. So I know a lot about these things. And then when scientists started slowly coming to social media, which is great, I think it's fantastic, but I saw a lot of bad, I don't want to say bad behavior, wrong approaches with respect to communication. So in 2017, I decided to do something about it. And I thought I'm going to do it in a way that is in line with the way scientists do. And that's to start a journal club to show them the latest research about um, what is effective communication. So, and uh, I was lucky to be able to find my co-founders, and then later on other of our members joined, and each of them, we're all just a group of gals trying to make a difference.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Um, so what was the most exciting thing you've recently discussed in your podcast?
The most exciting thing, um, we've done a lot of, let's see, our latest one was, I think it was so this year in February, we gave a talk at the American Association for Advancement of Science about reaching out to the undecided, just in general. Um, so our latest Twitter chat was a summary of our talk at the American Association for Advancement of Science, and there was a lot of interesting discussion. Some of the other very cool things that we discussed was science communication in different languages. One thing we do every January is we have a contest, and which is called State Your Mission Challenge. And one of the things that I noticed that scientists weren't doing for their science communication, they really lacked a clear vision of how they wanted to do it. And the best way to do this is to create a mission statement. So we started a challenge of stating our mission statement, and then people will write their mission statement and submit it on Twitter. And so we've been doing this for 4 years now. And it's fantastic. We discover so many awesome things. And one of the things that we discussed was one of our winners is trying to translate science communication and science in general into different languages, because it's not accessible to all languages. Most science, as you probably know, is in English, and that leaves out a lot of people. So that was probably one of our most exciting and the most popular chat that we had and podcast.
Oh, that's really cool. So why did you decide to become a biology professor?
Somebody asked once on Twitter what made you decide to do a PhD, and my answer was because I thought that was me, and I was right. So it's just I've ever since I was a kid, I was interested in learning and asking questions. I was a nerd. So it makes sense, and I
Yeah.
loved biology, so I just followed my passion.
Um, uh, how can we prevent misinformation from social media?
You cannot prevent it, but you can combat it, because it's going to come. Misinformation has always been there. Misinformation has been the probably most powerful tool by tyrants and dictators in history. So they're there, and they are going to be there. The important thing for you is to be out there and to do outreach, to to debunk, educate yourself. And when people are on social media and they see a piece of misinformation, um, you need to be out there to clarify it. And just like remember that we talked about those anti-vaccination pages where they're smaller, they didn't have a lot of followers, but they were effective nevertheless. And one common misconception is that I have to have a lot of followers, or I really have to be famous for people to listen to me. But I advocate the opposite, because a lot of motivation for people to believing somebody is whether or not they trust them. And the people who trust you the most are your family and friends and your acquaintances. So if each and every one of us, if you have a Facebook page or Instagram account or Snapchat, anything, okay? If you just reach out to your own small community, and when a misinformation comes out, to clarify it without making people feel stupid, then that would have a powerful effect. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much for answering all my questions and for that wonderful presentation.
You're welcome.
So you guys can all follow the social medias that Dr. Nourani shared on her last slide. And yeah, if you would like to add any last thoughts.
I just thank you very much for inviting me, and thank you for doing this. This is just so impressive. You should be proud of yourself for doing this for young people, and just let me know if you ever need any help.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.